Last night I finally watched American History X for the first time, and it was amazing. And I have to talk about it right now because otherwise I'm not going to be able to talk about everything because I'm bound to forget a couple of details along the way. So this section's being recorded early. This movie is great. If you haven't seen it, I will quickly detail a bit about the plot before we get a bit more in depth about it. So essentially, you've got two brothers, played by Edward Norton and Edward Furlong, Derek and Danny, and there's two plot lines going on essentially. You've got the modern day timeline where Edward Norton comes out of jail as a different person to when he went in there, and he's trying to change his brother's perspective on the whole neo-Nazi lifestyle, because this movie deals with neo-Nazis. Edward Norton is one, and his brother essentially idolizes him, and the dynamic between those two is probably the main center point of the whole movie. The other plot point is in the past. That part's all in black and white. So you've got why Edward Norton's character Derek went to jail. He killed two black people outside of his house. One of them in a really brutal way. He makes the guy bite the curb and curb stomps him. And like, you don't see it in graphic detail, but there's enough implication there for it to still be uncomfortable. And then him going to jail and essentially changing as a person and wanting to do better in his life. The dynamic between the two brothers throughout the movie is really, really interesting too, because in some of the black and white scenes you do see Edward Norton acting like a completely horrible, irredeemable person because he's got a swastika tattooed on him. He's going around racially abusing people, going on semi-racist tangents, and the rest of his family isn't really approving of it, but his brother, Edward Furlong, or Danny as his character's called, looks up to him. And the whole movie is essentially about hatred and how living a life of hate is not worth it, and sort of the cycle of violence that comes with being a hateful person. And I thought it was handled absolutely beautifully. Like, I did not think for a second when I started watching this movie that I was going to go from absolutely hating both of these characters to tearing up and actually crying at the end of this movie, because I did. It takes expert writers for you to take these horrible, morally grey people and then do a complete 180 and make you not necessarily forgive them for what they've done, because what they've done cannot be forgiven. The way that they treat people and the way that they act and the violent acts that have been committed cannot be forgiven. But when Edward Norton's character goes to jail and that whole section plays out where he befriends a black guy begrudgingly at first, it takes a few scenes for him to even really say a word to him, but then they laugh together and you can see that sort of hatred fizzle a little bit in Edward Norton. And because he has befriended a black person in prison, his gang that he joined, the other neo-Nazis in the prison, attack him and rape him in a shower. So you see him getting brutalized simply because he was on speaking terms with a black person. And I felt like these scenes were really, really powerful and sort of almost make you feel sorry for Derek, which again is something that I really did not expect to happen. Because earlier on in the movie you see him on a basketball pitch basically being like, oh, you guys get out of here if we win, you never show your faces here again. And then he later on kills a couple of black people as well. And the scene at the dinner table as well with his family, where he's going on a rant not only about immigration, which are right-wing talking points. He goes from being sort of moderately right-wing to really, really exposing himself as a full-blown fascist. And that scene was perfectly done as well. So like I said, it takes some really, really expert writing to make you go from this person's a piece of shit, they deserve death, to, at the end of the movie, almost feeling sorry for him. The redemption arc in the last 45 minutes or so of this movie is amazing. He comes to terms with the fact that his sins cannot be forgiven, but he wants to leave that lifestyle behind, which I think is something that everyone can relate to in some way. Everyone has regrets, everyone's made mistakes, obviously what this character's done is a massive mistake, and not a way that anyone should be living their lives. But the themes of wanting to atone for your sins and lead a better life are there throughout, and I feel like that's something that anyone can relate to, which I think is also another interesting talking point, because it also makes you kind of uncomfortable while you're watching it, because you see this horrible person go through this change, coming out of prison, wanting nothing to do with the lifestyle and wanting to change his brother, who idolizes him's viewpoints so that he doesn't follow the same path as him. And it makes the viewers pretty uncomfortable because you don't want to relate to this guy, but towards the end of the movie you kind of can't help but see sort of where he's coming from now, in the sense that he wants to change his life and leave everything negative that he's done behind him. I have to give some serious props to the ending of this movie as well. It pulled the rug from underneath me. I did not expect the ending to happen how it happened. So again, I've already talked a bit about spoilers. This is a spoiler review. This movie's been out for like 24 years, something like that. So I'm going to spoil it. I'm allowed, okay? It's been enough time. But essentially, for the last 15-20 minutes or so, you think that maybe Derek's going to die. There are signs that people are going to hunt him down and kill him. And you're kind of worrying for him because, like I mentioned many times before, he's trying to figure his life out and leave all of his negative stuff behind. But he doesn't die. It all culminates in his brother Danny going to school, going to the urinal, turns around, and a black kid shoots him. I wish I was kind of recording my reaction, because I was thinking, oh, Edward Norton's gonna die, and it'll be like, oh, cycle of violence, it's all bad, don't follow that lifestyle, and Danny will learn from his mistakes and then lead a better life without his brother around. Nope. That's not what happens at all. He's shot and killed, and Edward Norton's reaction when he finds his brother's dead body in the bathroom is honestly gut-wrenching. Honestly, I was not expecting that. That was masterful. Another really interesting plot point is to do with the father of the family as well. So there is a flashback towards the end of the movie with Derek's father at a table, and Derek's talking to him about what they're learning at school. And then it kind of mirrors the scene earlier in the movie where Derek goes on a racist rant. The father doesn't go on a rant as intense, but he makes his opinions very well known, and it sort of implies that racism is taught. No one is born inherently racist. It's sort of passed down to generations, and I really, really liked that aspect as well. I like that they touched on that, because it shows that after Derek's dad is killed, it's said earlier in the movie he's killed by a black guy, and that's the turning point for Derek, really, where he basically hears what his father's been feeding him over these dinner table conversations and makes his entire life about it. So in a way, it is kind of a tragedy. No, it's not kind of a tragedy, it is a tragedy. It results in the younger brother being killed at the end, and because of his father's death, Derek hates black people and turns to this life of being a neo-Nazi because of tragic events in his life. And I love how the movie doesn't really show you too much of what Derek was like before he became this way, but there's enough in there in that dinner table scene towards the end of the movie where you get an idea that he wasn't really, he wasn't like a model citizen, he wasn't a straight A student or anything, but he wasn't radicalized yet. And how the movie spends little time, but uses that little time very, very effectively to make you understand and sympathize with him a little bit more. The movie's almost split into two sections. It's 2 hours long. The first hour is basically, this guy is a horrible person. His younger brother is slowly approaching that level of horribleness. He hasn't really acted out in any violent ways yet, but again, he idolizes his brother and he wants to be just like him to make him proud. And the second half is making you really sort of put everything into perspective and make you almost side with Derek, because you want him to change his brother's mind. There's even a really powerful scene where they've had a long chat and Derek tells Danny about his time in jail and everything that happened to him, and they go home and they rip down all of the Hitler and Nazi memorabilia from their room, and that's a really powerful scene as well because they're just ripping all these posters down, throwing them away, and the brothers are sort of one again. They're on the same page because there was a bit of conflict slightly earlier in the movie where they go to, I guess it's a rally. There's Nazi metal concerts going on, and the Derek eventually beats up half to death the leader of the group as well, and everyone's turning against him, saying that he's a lover of black people. That's how I'll say it because I'm not going to say actually what they call him. His girlfriend turns against him. I really like the scene as well where Edward Norton sits down with his character's girlfriend and tries to convince her to leave this life behind with him, and she's not having any of it. I really like the fact that he obviously really, really loved her and wanted to spend the rest of his life with her, but he wanted to get her away from this lifestyle as well, and he tried, but she completely turned on him as well. It's just the last hour of this movie is really, really interesting. I really liked the first hour, but the second hour I think is practically perfect in my eyes. There's not really anything I would have changed about the last hour of this movie. Just all the character decisions they made, from the little interaction between, I can't remember the black guy that he befriends' name in prison, but the little interaction before Edward Norton leaves the jail, and they have sort of like a little fist bump, and you can tell that there's some mutual respect there, and just everything from that small but 1 minute interaction to the last couple of minutes of the movie with a monologue from Danny about hate and letting it go and sort of where it all leads to, and seeing that he dies as well. It's just masterful, honestly. I could probably go on about this movie for a lot longer, but not without scripting it out a little bit more, because I feel like I'm repeating some of my points. But this movie it's great. It might even be in maybe my top 15 movies of all time. It's probably up there with the Scott Pilgrims, the Dark Knights, the Pulp Fictions, Superbad. It's got to be somewhere within the top 15. I like it more than Saving Private Ryan that I saw the other day. This is the best movie I've seen in quite a while. I happily give it like a 9 out of 10. This movie is great.